Ew, spiders. In 1995, a famous arachnologist named Norman Platnick wrote the following line: "Wherever you sit as you read these lines, a spider is probably no more than a few yards away." That scary notion has been talked about and debated over the years, ever since he wrote it, and it's a professional conclusion that he was probably right, but not in the way that you might think. Not because spiders are everywhere, it's mostly because he knew his audience, and demographically speaking, wherever you sit reading these lines was probably in an academic environment, a residential area, some pocket of civilization, right? Probably not on the ocean, in Antarctica or above the Arctic Circle, where spiders are a little more scarce. Anyhow, spiders are fascinating, but I still don't like them. And for well over 100 years, spiders have been the subject of games. It appears that children have been playing games ever since children were invented. And surely the relationship between spiders and flies makes a perfect setting for a game. An appropriate allegory for luring your fellow players into your lair as the spider at the center of the web. Books published in the early 1800s of children's activities generally had some sort of tag game that was set in a similar spider and fly situation out of doors. As we all know, the predator versus prey theme behind games has been around for many centuries. I found reference to this card game, which was published in the 1870s by the McLaughlin brothers. And here's a later version of the same game with nice big creepy spiders on the cards. And they also published a more famous board game in the 1880s based on the same theme. That one was also released in a couple of different editions over the years. And I'll talk about a few more spider and fly games later in the video. Now, we've noticed in past videos that a lot of manufacturing companies would decide to diversify into the board game publishing arena. It's all about the great American pastime of tinkering, that inventive spark that wants you to try new things, that compulsion to experiment and to invent and to innovate are all found in the development of games. And this week's video is in that same vein. It begins in Kalamazoo, Michigan, about 120 years ago. The brothers Frank and Charles Fuller were tinkerers, and in 1891, Charles was awarded a patent for a new design of washboard. Yeah, this thing. Most clothes washing was done this way back in the 1880s. Although there were some mechanized washing machines, if you could afford one of those, you could afford to pay somebody to do your wash for you. And they most likely used a washboard. Well, anyway, the brothers Fuller got together and started building these washboards, and it gave them the opportunity to build their manufacturing company, the Fuller Brothers Manufacturing Company. Well, Frank couldn't let his brother Charlie take all the glory, of course, so he started tinkering on his own, and he came up with a board game. Now, also, during the 1880s, this fella, whose name also was Frank, Frank A. Munsey, was publishing a popular magazine called Munsey's Magazine. It was very popular all the way across the nation, and it was kind of the spokesperson for popular culture, like most magazines, and it catered to the family unit. In the October 1889 edition of Munsey's Magazine, this advertisement appeared. Frank had got his game in the public eye, and the Fuller brothers added board games to their inventory of washboards. I found plenty of diagrams for the board for this earliest spider and fly game of Frank Fuller's, but I've not found a picture of the actual board. According to a couple of different articles, the original was printed on fabric. So maybe hidden somewhere in a museum, there's a sample of the original cloth board for the spider and the fly. The only image I've found that might have been printed to cloth was this one, and it's really low resolution, so you can't really tell what's there. Frank received a patent for the game in June of 1901, It was U.S. patent number 676581. Well, then the Spider and the Fly game kind of faded from public view, apparently, and the Fuller brothers, being tinkerers, turned their attention to other pursuits. Now, before we begin Chapter 2, let me just take a couple of seconds to thank you for being here and remind you, if you like this video, to click that like button. Be sure to share it with your friends, subscribe, push the little dinger so that you'll be reminded when I publish future videos. And also be aware that this episode is brought to you by the letter A. Now, about 150 miles north of Kalamazoo is a little Michigan town of Ludington. Just as the Fuller brothers were putting together their manufactory in Kalamazoo, the Ludington Novelty Company was beginning to get started. Henry Haskell started the company in 1883, making baskets and small wooden products like clothespins and trivets and so on. Mr. Haskell was a tinkerer with quite a few patents and products to his name over the years. Well, sometime around 1889, he devised a flicking game that was played on a large board with little discs, and it was a variation on a game from India. And he called it a Carrom board. And the word Carrom means to bounce off from a surface, which is what these little discs would do. Now, sometime in the future, I'm going to do a video on the Carrom Company and their products, so be watching for that. In 1901, the Ludington Novelty Company merged with the Arcarina Company from Peoria, Illinois. And then in 1902, they received a patent for their Style C Carrom board, which included a crokinole board on one side, and on the other, Fuller's Spider and the Fly game. And in the year 1919, they came out with what they called their Crown Combination board. Crown number 1 was an alternate name for it. And this included instructions for 40 different games that could be played on the board, and one of those was the Spider and the Fly. Fuller had licensed his game to the Carrom Company, and in fact, some of those instruction books have Fuller as a copyright holder for the instructions. So I imagine he still was receiving some kind of royalties. After all, he held the patent. Let's look at the rules, how to play the Spider and the Flies. The board represents a spider's web, with a spider's den in the center. There are 19 game pieces in the set. 13 are common flies, colored yellow, which are worth 1 point each, and 5 blue flies, which are worth 3 points each, and, of course, the spider. One team is the flies, the other team is the spider. The object of the game is to score 15 points. The flies attempt to get into the spider's den and score according to their values. The spider seeks to consume the flies and keep them out of his den, earning points from those consumed flies. The pieces begin the game in the configuration shown here. The flies arranged on the outer 2 rings all on one side of the web, and the spider sits in the den at the center of its web. The flies start first. Yellow flies may only move forward towards the center or around the circles. Blue flies may move backwards as well. The spider's turn is a little more complex. The spider may move in a straight line on any of the lines, the spokes of the web, as far as the player desires. But the spider cannot pass over the double circle, either going out or coming in, without stopping there. On the single-line circular paths, the spider may move just 1 space, clockwise or anticlockwise. On the double-lined circle, the spider may move up to 4 points in either direction. The spider eats the flies by jumping them and immediately removes them from the board. As in drafts or checkers, the space on the opposite side of the fly must be empty. The spider must continue to jump if additional jumps are possible in any direction. If a choice may be made between 2 such possibilities, the spider can choose which to take. The spider may execute a long jump from the den to take any fly sitting on the double circle, unless there's another fly on the point just beyond it or in between. The spider may execute a long jump on the double circle to take a fly standing on the intersection 4 points away, if there is no fly on the next point beyond and none between. The spider may execute a long jump clear across the double circle, passing through the center on its way, and jump a fly on the opposite side of the double circle if there are no intervening flies and the point beyond is empty. Each time a fly lands on the center of the web, it scores points based on its color. 1 point for yellow, 3 points for blue. The rules aren't clear on the scoring fly's movement beyond this maneuver. Without further clarification, it looks like a blue fly could oscillate between the den and a neighboring point without penalty, but a yellow fly would be unable to move outward to escape the den and continue. So I assume that a fly would be compelled to leave the board after scoring, sacrificing itself for the points. I have not played Spider in the Flies yet against an opponent. I've played around with it myself, but not with a human being. I have several Carrom boards in my collection. The oldest one I have is style E from the 1930s, so I don't have the original Spider and Fly versions. So I guess one of these days I'll just have to make a board for the spiders and the flies and give it a try. Meanwhile, if you do before I do, let me know how it goes. And it seems to be kind of a challenging game, especially with all the options that the spider has. Something a little different for the fans of Predator versus Prey games. Now let's see what the Fuller brothers are up to. There was another set of brothers in Kalamazoo about the same time, named Maurice and Charles Blood. They owned the Kalamazoo Cycle Company. Apparently bicycle mechanics are very inventive folks, and the Blood brothers got together and built their first automobile in 1902. They did not call it the Bloodmobile. But the Fullers got excited about the idea too, and so these four brothers started the Michigan Automobile Company, and their first production model was in 1903. It's on display at the Gilmore Auto Museum. Over the next few years, they produced a very limited number of automobiles. They had the 1905 version here. But the Bloods decided that they would split off from the Fuller brothers and start their own company manufacturing auto parts for other automobile companies. And so the Fullers and their sons decided to specialize in transmissions and gear linkages and such. By the 1930s, they were supplying a lot of auto parts to other automakers around the country. This particular vehicle was apparently the largest, most powerful truck in the armed services during World War II. They called it the Dragon Wagon, and it featured a Fuller transmission. Fuller manufacturing was very successful through the 1950s, and in 1958 they were bought by the Eaton Corporation. Now, as far as the Carrom Company, like I said, I'm going to do a video on them someday in the future, so stick around for that coverage later. As for the Spider and the Flies, the game again faded from view, and the name of the game was resurrected several times over the years. In 1932, Milton Bradley came out with this model here with the Spider and the Flies. It apparently was kind of a dexterity game. It used a spinning top. In 1962, Whitman published The Spider and the Fly. It was another kind of a dexterity game in that there were dice, and when the results of the dice were revealed, the players had to race to grab the fly if you were the spider, or avoiding the spider if you were the fly. And then in 1997, Milton Bradley published another Spider and Fly game and another dexterity game. In 2006, Family Pastimes published The Old Spider and the Flies. Family Pastimes publishes a lot of low-budget co-op games for kids. I've got their Max game and a couple others, and they're fun. They're fun little games. And I have not tried their Spider and Fly, their old Spider and Fly game. And so with that, I think I'm pretty much done talking about our eight-legged friends and how they wreak havoc on the fly population. But I hope you enjoyed this historic journey as much as I did. And I want to remind you, of course, to be sure to play every day. While mind putting together that Carrom Company video over the next few months. If you have any experiences or anything you'd like to share about that company or about the Spider and the Fly, drop me a line and we'll see if we can't collaborate a little bit on the subject matter of the Carrom boards. I'll be looking forward to it. And meanwhile, thank you for tuning in.